A mother's last will and testament is her final word. For Amelia Sterling. A woman who had spent her life curating beauty and art, her final words were not going to be a whisper. They were going to be a thunderclap. Gathered in a stuffy London law office were her grieving twins, her unfaithful husband, and his smug mistress, who was already mentally spending a fortune she believed was hers. They all thought they knew what the will would say. But they didn't know Amelia. They had no idea she had spent the last year of her life curating her ultimate masterpiece, a final devastating act of justice. The offices of Davies, Pennington, and Finch were a relic of a bygone era, nestled in a quiet, cobbled street in London's legal quarter of Holborn. The air inside smelled of old leather lemon polish and centuries of sealed secrets. For the 20-year-old twins, Olivia and Liam Sterling, the scent was suffocating. It had only been a week since the funeral. A week since they had stood under a perpetually gray English sky and watched their mother's casket be lowered into the earth. The grief was still a raw physical presence, a weight on their chests that made every breath an effort. Olivia sat rigidly on a plush leather Chesterfield, her hands clenched in the lap of her simple black dress. She had her mother's deep blue eyes now shadowed and swollen from crying. She stared at a portrait of a bewigged judge on the wall, focusing on a crack in the oil paint to keep herself from shattering. Beside her, Liam was a coiled spring of rage. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrest. He looked so much like their father, a fact that seemed to be a source of constant simmering fury for him in recent days. Across from them sat the reason for that fury, their father Robert Sterling, and his companion Sophia Dubois. Robert, a man who had once been charming and vibrant, now looked deflated and uncomfortable. He couldn't meet his children's eyes. His gaze darted around the mahogany-paneled room, landing anywhere but on the two people who were a living testament to the family he had fractured. He was a man adrift, his anchor. Amelia gone, leaving him tethered to the younger, far more demanding woman beside him. Sophia Dubois was the antithesis of everything their mother had been. Where Amelia had been understated elegance, Sophia was overt glamour. She wore a tight-fitting cream dress that was wholly inappropriate for the occasion, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She radiated an aura of impatient entitlement. She checked her reflection in the dark screen of her phone, occasionally patting Robert's hand, in a gesture that was meant to look comforting, but came across as proprietary. She was here, Olivia thought, with a fresh wave of nausea to claim her prize. The prize was the Sterling Gallery. Amelia Sterling hadn't just been a wife and mother. She had been a force in the art world. Starting with a small inherited sum and an impeccable eye for talent, she had built one of London's most prestigious contemporary art galleries from the ground up. The Sterling name meant something. It meant quality, integrity, and immense value. The gallery, their beautiful 4-story townhouse in Knightsbridge, a portfolio of priceless art and considerable investments that was Amelia's legacy. And Sophia was looking at it like a starving wolf, eyeing a feast. The door opened, and Mr. Alistair Davies entered. He was a man who seemed to be made of the same aged wood and leather as his office, tall, thin, with a quiet dignity, and eyes that had seen the best and worst of human nature, often in the same room. He had been Amelia's lawyer and confidant for over 30 years. "Good morning," he said, his voice a calm baritone. He gave the twins a look of genuine sympathy before his gaze settled with professional neutrality on Robert and Sophia. "Thank you all for coming. I am the executor of the last will and testament of Amelia Catherine Sterling. My duty is to read this document to you as she instructed." He sat behind his large, ornate desk and put on a pair of spectacles. He produced a thick, cream-colored envelope, breaking the wax seal with a practiced thumb. The crisp crackle of the paper was the only sound in the room. This will was signed and witnessed on the 15th of October of last year. Mr. Davies began, approximately 3 months before Amelia's passing. At the time of signing, I can attest, as can her physician, Dr. Anand, that she was of completely sound mind and under no duress. Sophia shifted in her seat, leaning forward slightly. The pleasantries were over. This was the moment. She shot a quick, triumphant glance at Olivia, a look so full of smug certainty it made Olivia's stomach clench. Sophia truly believed she had won. She believed that with Amelia gone, the fortune would pass to the husband as it should, and from him to her. The twins would be a footnote, an inconvenience to be managed. "Let us begin," Mr. Davies said, clearing his throat. He looked down at the document, and for a fleeting second, Olivia thought she saw a flicker of something in his eye. Not sadness, but a kind of grim satisfaction. The storm was about to break. Mr. Davies began with the usual legal formalities, the language dense and archaic, speaking of debts and funeral expenses. Robert shifted his weight, his discomfort palpable. Sophia let out a barely audible sigh of impatience, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her expensive leather handbag. They wanted the lawyer to get to the point, the money. "We will now proceed to the bequests," Mr. Davies announced, looking over the top of his spectacles. Amelia was quite specific in her wishes. He started with the minor items. A generous sum of £25,000 was left to their longtime housekeeper, Maria, for her years of loyal service. Another £50,000 was to be donated to the hospice that had cared for Amelia in her final weeks. These were expected gestures of a kind and generous woman. Robert nodded along a performance of solemn agreement. Sophia managed to look bored. "Next," Mr. Davies continued, turning a page, "we address the matter of Amelia's personal effects. This includes her jewelry wardrobe and other items of a personal nature." He paused, his eyes finding Olivia. "To my darling daughter, Olivia Sterling, I leave my entire collection of jewelry. This includes my engagement ring, my wedding band, and the sapphire necklace my grandmother gave me. Wear them in health and happiness, my love. Know that with every piece, my love is with you. I also leave to Olivia my complete wardrobe and all other personal items in the master bedroom." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. The jewelry wasn't about value. It was about connection. It was her mother's wedding ring, the ring her father had given her, now being passed to her daughter. It was a pointed, deliberate exclusion of the man sitting across from her. Liam reached over and squeezed his sister's hand, his own eyes glistening. Sophia scoffed softly, a little puff of air. A few old trinkets and some clothes for the mousy daughter. Fine. It kept her out of the way. "Now," Mr. Davies said, his voice remaining perfectly level, "we come to Amelia's bequest to her husband, Robert Sterling." Robert sat up straighter. Sophia's hand came to rest on his arm, a gesture of solidarity and anticipation. This was it. The main event. The gallery, the house, the portfolio, the empire. Mr. Davies read from the will. "To my husband Robert, I leave all of his personal belongings currently in my possession, including his books, his clothing, and the contents of his study. I trust he will arrange to have them collected from my home within 30 days. The phrase hung in the air. My home. Not our home. A deep frown creased Robert's forehead. Sophia's smile tightened at the edges. 30 days to collect his things. It was an insult. It was worded as if he were a departing guest, not the master of the house. And, Mr. Davies added, "There is one more item for you, Robert." He scanned the page. "I also leave to Robert the painting that hangs on the west wall of my bedroom, the one titled Continuum Number 7. It was, after all, the only piece of art in the entire house that he ever purchased with his own money. I hope it brings him as much joy as it always brought me discomfort." The insult was no longer veiled. It was a dagger, sharp and precise. Continuum Number 7 was a hideous piece of modern art, a chaotic splash of garish colors that Robert had bought at a bachelor auction for a ridiculous price years ago. Amelia had loathed it, only allowing it in their bedroom as a private joke between them. To have it be the only thing she bequeathed him from her vast, priceless collection was a slap in the face so profound, it left him speechless. Liam let out a short, sharp laugh, which he quickly smothered. Olivia could only stare, a sense of awe beginning to pierce through her grief. Her mother, even in death, was fighting. "That's it," Sophia hissed, her voice a sharp whisper. "His clothes and one ugly painting. What about the gallery? The house?" "Patience, Ms. Dubois," Mr. Davies said calmly, not looking up from the will. "We have not yet addressed the primary assets of the estate. All in due time." But the tone had been set. Amelia Sterling's will was not going to be a simple transfer of assets. It was a reckoning, and Mr. Davies, her loyal executor, was just getting started. The air in the room grew colder, thick with a sense of dread for some, and a glimmer of fierce, righteous hope for others. The tension in the room had become a living entity. Robert Sterling's face was a mottled red, a mixture of humiliation and disbelief. Sophia was vibrating with barely suppressed rage. She kept shooting venomous looks at the twins, as if this were somehow their fault. Liam met her glare with one of his own, a silent declaration of war. Mr. Davies turned another page, the crisp rustle sounding like a thunderclap in the charged silence. "We now come to the disposition of the main body of the estate," he announced. "This includes the Sterling Gallery, its complete inventory, and all associated business assets, the property at 22 Cadogan Square, Knightsbridge, the complete private art collection housed therein, and the entirety of the investment portfolio managed by Sterling Wentworth." This was the core, the entirety of the fortune. Millions upon millions of pounds. Everything Amelia had built over a lifetime. Robert leaned forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He had to believe the earlier bequests were a final petty jab from a dying woman. He had to believe that the law that decency would ensure the bulk of the fortune went to him, her husband of 25 years. He had been there after all. He'd attended the gallery openings, schmoozed the clients. In his mind, her success was their success. Sophia held her breath, her eyes wide and fixed on Mr. Davies. Her entire future was balanced on the tip of the lawyer's tongue. Mr. Davies took a slow, deliberate breath, ensuring he had everyone's complete attention. He then read his voice clear and unwavering from the will of Amelia Sterling. "All the remainder of my estate, both real and personal of whatsoever kind, and wheresoever situated, I give device and bequeath in its entirety to be shared in equal parts to my beloved children, Liam Sterling and Olivia Sterling." The words landed with the force of a physical explosion. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Olivia's mind went blank, unable to process the scale of what she had just heard. everything. The gallery. The house. She looked at Liam, whose mouth was slightly agape, his earlier anger replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. Robert was the first to react. "What?" He croaked the word, barely a whisper. "No, that can't be right. There must be a mistake. Read it again." "There is no mistake, Robert," Mr. Davies said calmly. "The clause is perfectly clear. Everything is left to Liam and Olivia." Sophia's face, which had been a mask of greedy anticipation, was now a canvas of utter horror. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking pale and ghastly beneath her expensive makeup. Her perfectly painted lips trembled. "No." The word erupted from her, a raw, guttural shriek of pure, thwarted avarice. It was a sound completely stripped of her cultivated poise. "No, that's impossible. She can't do that. She can't cut out her own husband. It's not legal, Robert, tell him." She grabbed Robert's arm, her long nails digging into the fabric of his suit. "Robert, do something. This is your money, your life. She's giving it all to those ungrateful brats." Liam surged to his feet. "You shut your mouth," he roared, his grief and rage finally boiling over. "You have no right to be in this room, let alone speak our mother's name. Get out." "Liam, stop!" Olivia cried, grabbing her brother's arm, terrified the explosive situation was about to turn physical. "Indeed, Mr. Sterling, please sit down," Mr. Davies commanded, his voice sharp and authoritative. "Ms. Dubois, control yourself. This is a legal proceeding." "It's a farce!" Sophia screamed, her voice cracking. "We'll contest it, we'll sue. A wife can't just leave her husband with nothing. The gallery was a marital asset. He's entitled to half, everyone knows that." She was right on a basic level. Under normal circumstances, marital property laws would ensure a spouse received a significant portion, often half of an estate, built during the marriage. Robert, though stunned, began to rally, clinging to this legal principle like a drowning man to a raft. "She's right," he said, finding his voice. "Alistair, this is madness. Amelia might not have been in her right mind. All those drugs, the pain—" Mr. Davies held up a single imperious hand. The gesture was so commanding that it silenced the room instantly. He waited for the echoes of Sophia's shrieking to fade before he spoke again, his voice dropping to a low, chillingly calm register. "As I stated at the beginning, Amelia was of perfectly sound mind, and she was also a very, very thorough woman." He looked from Robert's desperate face to Sophia's furious one. "You are correct," he conceded, a glint in his eye. "Under normal circumstances, Robert would indeed have a strong claim to half of the marital estate. But I must advise you, there is more." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Amelia anticipated you would contest the will. So she included a condition. Liam and Olivia inherit everything, provided a certain truth is entered into the record." Olivia felt a shiver of cold dread and awe. A truth her mother, the master curator, had saved her most shocking exhibit for last. The bombshell had dropped, but Olivia suddenly realized it was not the main event. It was merely the prelude to something far, far bigger. Alistair Davies allowed the silence to stretch, letting the weight of his last statement settle upon the room's occupants. Robert and Sophia stared at him, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning fear. A condition, a truth. It sounded ominous, a trap being laid from beyond the grave. "A condition," Robert finally stammered. "What kind of condition?" "A legal one," Mr. Davies replied smoothly. He reached into his briefcase and produced a second, much thinner document, a slim, black, leather-bound ledger. He placed it on the desk with a soft, definitive thud. "Before we proceed," the lawyer said, "I need to provide some context. As you know, Amelia and you, Robert, were married 25 years ago. At that time, Amelia was a junior curator at the Tate, and you were a junior partner at an architectural firm. Neither of you had significant personal assets. Robert nodded mutely. This was the narrative he clung to, that they had started with nothing and built their empire together. However, Mr. Davies continued tapping a long, bony finger on the black ledger. 2 years before your marriage, Amelia's grandmother passed away, leaving her a modest inheritance. The sum was precisely £75,000. Sophia rolled her eyes. £75,000. It was a pittance compared to the tens of millions now at stake. What does that have to do with anything? She demanded. It has everything to do with everything, Ms. Dubois, Mr. Davies said, his voice turning sharp. Because Amelia, being the meticulous woman, she was never integrated that inheritance into the marital finances. She kept it in a separate account, under her maiden name, as was her legal right. It was her separate, non-marital property. He opened the ledger. The pages were filled with Amelia's elegant, precise handwriting. A year into your marriage, Robert, Davies went on, his eyes fixed on him. Amelia decided to leave the Tate and open her own gallery. She asked you for a loan from your joint savings to help her start it. You declined. You told her it was too risky, an investment, and that she should focus on starting a family. Robert flinched, as if he'd been struck. He remembered that conversation. He remembered his dismissive tone, his lack of faith. He had never believed her little gallery would amount to much. So, Mr. Davies said, the finality in his voice like a judge's gavel. Amelia used her own money. She used the £75,000 inheritance, her separate property, as the sole seed capital to lease a small space in Chelsea and purchase her first 3 paintings. The Sterling Gallery was not founded with marital funds. It was founded with Amelia Sterling's personal pre-marital inheritance. He held up the ledger. And this is the proof. For 25 years, Amelia kept a secret ledger. It is a work of forensic accounting genius. It tracks every penny. Every business loan was secured against the gallery's own assets, not your joint property. Every expansion, every investment, every significant art purchase can be traced directly back to profits generated by the gallery itself. She meticulously documented how her entire empire grew from that single non-marital seed. She never once commingled the gallery's finances with your joint marital funds. The room was utterly still. Olivia and Liam were staring at the ledger in awe. They had known their mother was brilliant, but this level of foresight, of quiet defensive planning, was staggering. The law on this matter in the UK is crystal clear, Mr. Davies stated now, the professor lecturing a class of stunned pupils. Assets acquired before the marriage, or assets grown from pre-existing separate property, can remain separate property if they are not intermingled with marital assets. The Sterling Gallery, the art collection, the investments, they are not marital property, Robert. They never were. They were and remain the sole and separate property of Amelia Sterling. Sophia's face was a mask of disbelief. But the house, they lived in it together. Purchased with a mortgage secured by the gallery's profits with the title solely in Amelia's name, Davies countered, without missing a beat. Robert was a resident, not an owner. All the bills the upkeep paid from the gallery's business account. He closed the ledger. Which brings us to the condition. Liam and Olivia inherit the entire estate, provided that they agree to enter this ledger and its supporting documentation into the public record in the event of any legal challenge from Mr. Sterling. The will stipulates that the truth of how the Sterling fortune was built must be made public if Robert decides to contest it. The trap was finally revealed in all its beautiful, brutal glory. Amelia had left Robert a choice. He could walk away with his ugly painting and his dignity however tattered, and the world would know him only as Amelia Sterling's widower. Or he could fight for a share of the fortune, in which case the world would be presented with irrefutable proof that he had contributed absolutely nothing to it. He had been little more than a lodger in the magnificent life his wife had built around him. She had given him a choice, his pride or his greed. He could not have both. Robert Sterling finally understood. He had been utterly comprehensively and brilliantly outmaneuvered. He slumped in his chair, a completely broken man, the weight of his own insignificance crushing him. The fight had gone out of Robert Sterling completely. He stared at the black ledger on the desk as if it were a venomous snake. His reputation as a successful London power broker, a reputation that had been almost entirely propped up by his wife's success, would be shredded. He would be a laughingstock, a cautionary tale whispered at gallery openings and dinner parties. Amelia had known him perfectly. She knew his vanity was even greater than his greed. Sophia, however, was not defeated. She was enraged. "So that's it," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "She gets to poison everyone against you from the grave with her little book of lies, and you just sit there and take it." She turned on Robert, her eyes blazing. "You are not going to let her do this to us, Robert. I haven't stood by you through all of this just to be thrown out with nothing." The phrase "stood by you" was so outrageously inappropriate that Liam actually snorted in disgust. "Ms. Dubois," Mr. Davies said, his voice like a sheet of ice. "There is nothing for you here. You are not named in this will. You have no legal standing. Your presence in this room is a courtesy one that is rapidly expiring." He then looked past her, his gaze softening as it rested on the twins. "There is one final item." He reached into the original envelope and pulled out a smaller, sealed letter. It was addressed simply to "My children." "Amelia asked that I read this aloud as her final word on the matter," he said gently. Olivia braced herself, her heart aching. This was it. The final goodbye. Mr. Davies broke the seal and began to read their mother's last letter. The elegant, familiar handwriting was a comfort and a fresh source of pain. "My dearest Liam and Olivia," he began, his voice taking on the cadence of Amelia's own. "If you are hearing this, it means I am gone, and the hardest part of my life is over, not the illness, but the time spent away from you. My darlings, my greatest creations, please do not mourn for too long. My life was full because I had you. You were my sun, my moon, and all my stars." Olivia choked back a sob, and Liam put his arm around her, pulling her close. "I know that what you have just heard may seem shocking. It may seem cruel or vindictive. It is not. It is an act of protection. It is the last and most important thing I can do for you as your mother to secure your future and protect you from the consequences of your father's weaknesses." Robert flinched, staring at his hands. He could not look at his children. "I must be honest with you now, in a way I could not be in life. About 1.5 years ago, during one of my chemotherapy sessions, I came home early, and I learned of your father's relationship with Ms. Dubois. I discovered that this affair had been going on for years. The cruelty of that discovery at a time when I was fighting for my life is a pain I cannot describe. But it was also a moment of perfect, terrible clarity. The letter detailed her heartbreak, not with rage, but with a profound, aching sadness. She spoke of how she had seen Robert's character corrode over the years, how he had grown accustomed to the fruits of her labor, while contributing less and less, becoming a man defined by entitlement rather than ambition. I saw then that the man I had married was gone. In his place was a stranger who would allow his mistress to mock me in my own home, a man who saw my impending death not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity for him and for her. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my soul that if I allowed my legacy to fall into his hands, it would be squandered. It would be spent on frivolities, handed over to a woman who despised me, and you, my children, would be left with nothing. So I began to plan. I spent the last year of my life not just preparing to die, but preparing to protect you after I was gone. This will, the ledger, it is not an act of revenge against your father. It is an act of love for you. I have built a firewall around your inheritance, around your future, around the legacy of our family, the legacy of my family. The letter was a masterpiece of love and strategy. It was a final damning indictment of Robert and a soaring testament to her devotion to her children. The Sterling Gallery is not just a business. Mr. Davies read his voice thick with emotion. It is a part of me. It is my passion, my vision. And now it is yours. Do with it what you will. Grow it, change it, or sell it, and follow your own dreams. The money gives you freedom, but the legacy gives you purpose. Never forget the difference. Be good to each other. Love fiercely. Live honorably. And know always and forever that your mother loved you more than words can say. Goodbye, my darlings. Mr. Davies folded the letter and placed it on the desk. The room was silent, save for the sound of Olivia's quiet weeping. Liam held her tears streaming down his own face, but his expression was one of fierce pride. He finally understood. This wasn't about money. It was about a mother lioness using her last roar to protect her cubs from the jackals. The reading of the letter had sucked all the remaining air out of the room. It was a final, definitive statement that left no room for argument or interpretation. It had laid bare the truth of Robert's betrayal and the depth of Amelia's love. Robert Sterling sat, as if turned to stone. He was a man publicly stripped of his honor, his marriage revealed as a sham, and his character condemned by the woman whose life he was supposed to have shared. He was exposed not as a partner, but as a parasite. The weight of his children's silent judgment was more crushing than any legal ruling. He had not only lost a fortune, he had lost his family, his past, and any claim to a respectable future. Sophia Dubois, however, had no shame to lose only a prize, and she had just watched it vanish. The letter was the final nail in the coffin of her ambitions. Her face, a mask of fury just moments before, was now cold and calculating. She was a strategist, and she knew when a battle was lost. She looked at Robert, her expression one of utter contempt. He was no longer a wealthy benefactor, a ticket to a life of ease. He was a liability. A broke, humiliated middle-aged man with nothing to offer her. Without a single word, she stood up. She smoothed down her cream dress, picked up her handbag, and without a backward glance at the man she had professed to love, she walked out of the room. The sharp, decisive click of the heavy office door closing behind her was the sound of Robert Sterling's new life, beginning a life of solitude and regret. He didn't even watch her go. He simply sat there, staring into the abyss Amelia's will had opened at his feet. Mr. Davies allowed the moment to pass before he cleared his throat gently. "Robert," he said, his tone professional, but not unkind. "You have 30 days to make your decision. You can either accept the terms of the will, and this matter will be concluded privately, or you can file a contest, at which point I am legally bound by Amelia's instructions to submit the ledger and its contents to the court, making it a matter of public record. The choice is yours. But it wasn't a choice. Everyone in the room knew it. Robert gave a slow, defeated nod, unable to speak. Mr. Davies then turned his full attention to the twins, his entire demeanor changing. The stern lawyer vanished, replaced by the kind, avuncular man who had known them since they were children. "Liam, Olivia," he said softly, "this is a tremendous amount to process. A great fortune, but also a great responsibility has been placed on your shoulders." He pushed the letter and the black ledger across the desk toward them. "This ledger is yours now. It is the story of your mother's strength and brilliance. Her letter is her final gift. The estate will be held in trust, as she wished until you are both 25. I am the acting trustee, but Amelia specified that you are to be consulted on all major decisions regarding the gallery. She wanted you to learn to grow into the role. She had faith in you." Olivia reached out a trembling hand and touched the worn leather of the ledger. It felt warm, alive, imbued with her mother's spirit. It was the story of her life, written in numbers and ink. It was the ultimate shield she had forged for them. The grief was still immense, a vast ocean, but for the first time, Olivia felt a flicker of something else beneath its strength. Her mother had passed on more than just money. She had passed on her resilience, her fire. Liam looked at his sister, and a silent understanding passed between them. They were no longer just the grieving children. They were the custodians of a legacy. Their mother had given them a fortress, and now it was their duty to stand guard. "We won't let her down." Liam said, his voice thick but steady. "No," Olivia whispered, clutching the letter to her chest. "We won't." They stood up united in their grief and their newfound purpose. They gave a quiet thank you to Mr. Davies and turned to leave. As they walked past their father, he finally looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading sorrow. He opened his mouth as if to say something, an apology, an excuse, a plea for a connection that he himself had severed beyond repair. But no words came. There were none left. Liam and Olivia paused for a moment, looked at the broken man who was their father, and then together they walked out of the office, leaving him alone with the ghosts of his choices and the single ugly painting that was his only inheritance. The heavy oak door of Mistress Davies' office clicked shut behind Liam and Olivia, the sound sealing off one chapter of their lives and thrusting them, blinking into the next. The charged, claustrophobic atmosphere of the reading room was replaced by the cool, damp air of the Holborn street. For a long moment, they simply stood on the pavement, the city's muted roar, a distant hum, each lost in the swirling vortex of the last hour. The world looked the same, but their place in it had been irrevocably altered. They were motherless, and now in a way that felt just as profound fatherless too. And they were the inheritors of an empire. The taxi ride back to Knightsbridge was a silent one. Olivia held the thick manila envelope containing their mother's last letter and the thin black ledger against her chest as if it were a holy relic. She could feel the faint impressions of her mother's handwriting through the paper, a final tangible piece of her. Liam stared out the window, his reflection a grim, stoic mask overlaid on the blur of London passing by. What was there to say? Their world had been dismantled and reassembled in the space of an afternoon, the architecture of their family revealed as a beautiful lie on one side and a fortress of love on the other. When they arrived at the grand, white stuccoed townhouse that had been their home their entire lives, the silence felt different. It was no longer the heavy, grief-stricken silence of the past week. It was an echoing emptiness. This was no longer the family home. It was theirs. The key Olivia used to open the door felt heavier in her hand. Inside, everything was as it had been. A faint scent of their mother's favorite freesia perfume lingered in the air. Her elegant raincoat was still draped over a chair in the hall, but Robert's presence was already a phantom. His usual clutter, the newspapers on the coffee table, his briefcase by the door, his reading glasses on the mantelpiece, was conspicuously absent, as if he had been erased from the present moment even before his physical departure. They didn't speak. Liam went to the kitchen and mechanically made a pot of tea, the familiar ritual, a small anchor in the churning sea of emotion. Olivia walked into the vast drawing room, a space curated with a lifetime of love and impeccable taste. She ran her hand over a cool marble sculpture, her gaze falling on the spot where Continuum No. 7 had once hung before Amelia had banished it to the bedroom. It was a house of ghosts, now haunted by a love that had endured, and a love that had failed. Later that evening, Olivia found herself in her mother's study. It was the heart of the Sterling Gallery, the place where visions were born. Books on art history lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A large corkboard was covered in images, notes, and exhibition plans. It was a map of Amelia's mind. On the large leather-topped desk sat the ledger and the letter. With trembling hands, Olivia opened the letter and read it again, the words no longer mediated by Mr. Davies' solemn voice. This time, they were her mother's alone. I have built a firewall around your inheritance, around your future. A tear dropped onto the page, smudging the ink. It was not revenge. It was protection. Her mother hadn't died fighting a losing battle with cancer. She had died fighting a winning battle for her children's future. Liam found her there, leaning against the doorframe. I can't believe she did all that, he said, his voice raw. All that time while she was so sick, she was planning. She was fighting for us. She knew him, Olivia whispered, looking at the ledger. She knew he was weak. She knew what that woman was. She saw it all. She saw everything, Liam agreed. He walked over and stood beside her, looking at the organized chaos of the planning board. So what do we do now? It was the question that hung between them, vast and terrifying. They were 20 years old, a business student and an art history major, and they were now in charge of a multi-million-pound enterprise. I don't know, Olivia admitted, but we do it together. For her. Liam nodded, his jaw set with a new kind of determination. Together, he affirmed. The pact was made. In the quiet sanctity of their mother's study, surrounded by her legacy, the Sterling twins closed ranks. The era of grieving children was over. The era of stewardship had begun. The 30-day window given to Robert passed with an agonizing, silent crawl. There were no pleading phone calls, no angry letters from solicitors. The silence was in itself an admission of defeat. On the 29th day, a formal email arrived from Robert's new lawyer, addressed to Mr. Davies and forwarded to the twins, stating that Mr. Sterling would not be contesting the will. The day the movers came was cold and overcast, the sky the color of slate. Liam and Olivia decided they had to be there. It wasn't about supervision or spite. It was about bearing witness, about closing the final door themselves. They sat in the drawing room, drinking tea, listening to the hollow sounds of a life being packed into boxes. They heard the heavy tread of the movers upstairs in what had been their parents' bedroom, then in their father's study. After an hour, Robert himself appeared. He hadn't come to help, only to oversee. He looked older, smaller, somehow, lost in an expensive suit that now seemed to hang off his frame. He saw them sitting there, and for a moment he froze in the doorway, a chasm of unspoken words and irreparable damage stretching between them. His eyes were filled with a desperate cocktail of shame, sorrow, and a pathetic plea for understanding. Olivia could only offer him a polite, cool nod. Liam's face remained a mask of unforgiving stone. There was nothing left to say. The letter had said it all. The final item to be brought down was the painting Continuum No. 7. It was a large, aggressive piece, and the movers struggled with it on the grand staircase. Wrapped in protective plastic, its garish colors were muted, but its chaotic energy remained. It was the physical manifestation of his sole contribution, his singular, tasteless mark on their beautiful home. As they loaded it into the van, Robert gave his children one last lingering look, then turned and walked away down the rain-slicked street. Not even getting into the van, just a man walking away from the entire world he had lost. Weeks later, Olivia saw an article online. A real estate blog was profiling a new luxury high-rise in Canary Wharf, a district of sterile glass and steel towers, a world away from the historic warmth of Knightsbridge. The article featured an interview with a new resident, Robert Sterling. There was a photo of him in a minimalist, soul-crushingly beige apartment. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. And there on the wall behind him, dominating the small space with its hideous energy, was Continuum No. 7. He had been left with nothing but his bad taste. As for Sophia, her exit was as swift and transactional as her presence had been. About a month after the move, Olivia was idly scrolling through a society photographer's Instagram feed. There, under the glittering lights of a Monaco gala, was Sophia. She was clinging to the arm of a notoriously ruthless Russian billionaire, a man 20 years her senior, with eyes like a shark. Sophia was smiling her dazzling smile for the camera draped in diamonds that were surely a new acquisition. But looking closer, Olivia saw it, a hardness in her eyes, a brittle quality to her glamour. She hadn't found love or happiness. She had simply found a new employer. It was a hollow victory that only highlighted the profound nature of her defeat. The first day, the twins walked into the Sterling Gallery as its new owners was the most terrifying day of their lives. The gallery staff, many of whom had worked with Amelia for decades, greeted them with a mixture of pity and apprehension. Were these two kids going to destroy everything their mother had built? They were saved by Genevieve Delacroix, the gallery's senior director. A chic, formidable Frenchwoman in her late 50s, with a sharp bob of silver hair and an even sharper mind, Genevieve had been Amelia's most trusted colleague and friend. She had known the twins since they were toddlers, hiding behind sculptures during gallery openings. She gathered the entire staff in the main exhibition space. Amelia Sterling built this gallery on a foundation of integrity, courage, and an unerring eye for true talent. Genevieve announced, her voice ringing with authority. She has passed that legacy on to her children. They are not here to replace her, no one could. They are here to continue her work. Our job is to help them. We will do it for Amelia, and we will do it for the future of the gallery. It was a declaration of loyalty, a rallying cry that settled the staff and gave the twins a platform to stand on. Under Genevieve's mentorship, they began the slow, arduous process of learning. Liam, who had always seen his business degree as a path to a generic corporate job, found an unexpected passion in the back office. He dove into the gallery's finances not with the dry detachment of a student, but with the fervent curiosity of a historian. He wasn't just looking at numbers, he was looking at his mother's strategy. He saw the risks she took on unknown artists, the savvy investments she made in their careers, the way she balanced passion with shrewd business acumen. He spent weeks with the Black Ledger cross-referencing it with the official accounts marveling at the sheer genius of her financial firewall. He started dealing with the collectors, the shippers, the insurers. He discovered he had a knack for it, a calm authority that put people at ease. He was the guardian of the engine, ensuring the beautiful machine his mother had built continued to run flawlessly. Olivia's journey was more intuitive, more personal. She spent her days in the gallery's extensive archives, a temperature-controlled room filled with her mother's notes correspondence with artists and journals. Reading her mother's private thoughts on a painting, her fierce belief in a young sculptor, her dismissal of a trendy but shallow artist, it was like a masterclass from beyond the grave. One afternoon, following a trail of notes in a journal, Olivia found herself in a cramped, paint-spattered studio in a Shoreditch warehouse. There, a young, fiercely talented but unknown painter named Maya Cho was creating vast, emotionally charged canvases. She was exactly the kind of artist her mother would have championed. Terrified, but resolute, Olivia channeled Amelia's spirit. She spoke with Maya not as a wealthy patron, but as a passionate advocate. She remembered her mother's words from a journal, "Don't just buy the art, invest in the artist." Following her gut, Olivia acquired 3 of Maya's pieces, offering her a stipend to secure her studio time for the next year. It was her first major decision, her first real step out of her mother's shadow and into her own. They made mistakes. They argued over a potential acquisition, Liam citing the financial risk, Olivia arguing for the artistic merit. They nearly lost a major client through a scheduling error. But with every challenge, they learned to rely on each other, their bond forged even stronger in the crucible of their shared responsibility. Their guiding principle became a simple question they would ask each other during difficult moments. What would Mom have done? Nearly a year after the will reading, they felt ready. They decided their first major exhibition would be a full-circle tribute, a career retrospective for Agnes Harlow, a brilliant female sculptor now in her late 70s. Amelia had given Agnes her very first solo show over 20 years ago when no one else would. Now Agnes was a titan of the art world. It was the perfect way to honor their mother's legacy of championing overlooked female artists. The opening night was a major event on the London art scene. The gallery was buzzing, filled with the city's most influential collectors, critics, and artists. Liam, looking confident and at ease in a perfectly tailored suit, moved through the crowd, his mother's charm now his own. Olivia, in a simple, elegant blue dress that echoed her mother's style, stood beside a frail but beaming Agnes Harlow, discussing the powerful abstract forms of the sculptures. Halfway through the evening, Julian Finch, the most feared art critic in the country, and a man who had been both a friend and a fierce rival to Amelia, cornered the twins. "Your mother had a vision," he said, his voice a gravelly drawl, as he gestured at a towering bronze sculpture. "She saw the power in this work, when it was just a sketch on a napkin. The question is, do you—" Liam deferred to his sister. Olivia met the critic's piercing gaze without flinching. "We see her vision," she said, her voice clear and steady. "But we also see Agnes's journey. My mother saw the seed of this, but we have the privilege of seeing the forest. The power isn't just in the form, it's in the endurance. It's the story of a woman who kept creating even when the world wasn't watching. That's the story my mother always looked for." Julian Finch was silent for a long moment, studying her. Then a slow smile spread across his craggy face. "Well said," he grunted. "Your mother would be proud." It was the only validation they had ever needed. Later, after the last guest had departed, Liam and Olivia stood alone in the quiet, moonlit gallery. The space was filled with Agnes Harlow's magnificent sculptures, silent, powerful sentinels in the dark. A portrait of Amelia hung in the entrance hall, her painted eyes seeming to watch over them with a gentle, knowing smile. Liam raised his glass of champagne. "To Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To Mom," Olivia echoed, her own glass clinking against his. They stood there for a long time, bathed in the soft light, surrounded by beauty and history. The grief for their mother would always be a part of them, a quiet ache in their hearts. But it was no longer a weight that threatened to pull them under. It was an anchor, a source of strength. Amelia Sterling had curated a beautiful life, but her final, most enduring exhibition was the future she had built for her children. They were her legacy, alive, thriving, and ready to continue the story. The torch had not been dropped. It had been passed, and in their hands its flame burned brighter than ever. Amelia Sterling's story is a testament to the fact that the most powerful legacies are not built with money, but with wisdom, courage, and an unyielding love. She turned her deepest pain into a shield to protect her children, proving that a sharp mind and a detailed ledger can be more powerful than any legal challenge. Her final act was not one of revenge, but of profound justice, ensuring that her life's work would fall into the hands of those who would cherish it, not squander it. It's a chilling reminder that you should never ever underestimate a mother's will to protect her own. If this story of a mother's brilliant final move moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Your click helps us share more powerful stories like this one. Share this video with anyone who appreciates a story of intelligence triumphing over greed. And to ensure you never miss our next dramatic tale, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. What part of Amelia's plan did you find the most brilliant? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Thank you for watching.